My ex-wife is suing me for stalking her across 3 states. I've been under house arrest with an ankle monitor for the past 8 months. The process server handed me the lawsuit papers on a Thursday afternoon while I stood in my doorway, and I actually started laughing before I'd finished reading the first paragraph. Not because it was funny, but because the cognitive dissonance was so extreme my brain couldn't process it any other way. Vanessa Hartwell, my ex-wife of 2 years, was suing me for $340,000 in damages, claiming I'd been stalking her systematically across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York for the past 6 months. Following her to work, appearing at her gym, showing up at restaurants where she was eating, photographing her through windows, sending threatening messages from burner phones. The lawsuit included a restraining order violation notice, 14 documented incidents with dates, times, and locations, and witness statements from 6 people who'd allegedly seen me at these places. The reason I laughed, the reason my hands shook as I held those papers, was because of the black plastic device locked around my right ankle. The GPS monitoring bracelet I'd been wearing for 243 days straight, the one that tracked my location every 60 seconds and sent alerts to my probation officer if I moved more than 150 feet from my apartment. I hadn't left my home in 8 months, except for 3 pre-approved medical appointments, all within a 5-mile radius, all documented with travel permits and escort verification. I couldn't have stalked Vanessa across 3 states. I couldn't have stalked her across 3 streets. The monitoring system would have reported any unauthorized movement instantly, would have triggered law enforcement response, would have sent me back to county jail to serve out the remainder of my sentence. But according to the lawsuit I was holding, I'd been in Cleveland on March 18th, Pittsburgh on April 3rd, Rochester on May 11th, multiple locations, multiple states, multiple impossibilities. I'd been living at 4,832 Riverside Apartments, Unit 3B in Columbus, Ohio, since my release from county jail 8 months earlier, serving out the final year of a 2-year sentence for felony tax evasion under house arrest. The original conviction was legitimate. I'd made catastrophic mistakes during my business's collapse, failed to pay payroll taxes while desperately trying to keep my company afloat, compounded the problem by hiding assets. I'd pled guilty, spent 4 months in actual jail, and been granted house arrest for the remainder based on good behavior and my agreement to a payment plan for the back taxes and penalties. The ankle monitor was locked on at 6:17 a.m. on September 3rd of last year by Officer Rita Blackwell, my probation officer, a woman in her mid-40s with steel gray hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd supervised hundreds of probationers and developed extremely accurate bullshit detectors. She'd been clear about the rules. I could live in my apartment, could have visitors with prior approval, could work remotely from home, but I couldn't leave without explicit permission granted at least 72 hours in advance. The monitoring system tracked me constantly, and any violation would result in immediate arrest and return to jail to serve my remaining sentence behind bars. I'd been compliant for every single day, never tested the boundaries, never tried to tamper with the device. I'd lost my business, my house, my marriage, and most of my friends. I wasn't about to lose my freedom by doing something stupid. My daily routine had become mechanical. Wake up at 6:30 a.m., make coffee, work remotely for a software consulting firm that hired people with criminal records, eat meals I ordered through delivery apps, exercise in my small living room, video call with my sister in Arizona every Sunday. It was lonely and monotonous, but it was manageable. I had 14 months left on house arrest, then I'd be truly free to rebuild my life. Vanessa and I had divorced 18 months ago, finalized 3 months before I'd pled guilty to the tax charges. The divorce was brutal, but straightforward. We'd been married for 6 years, had no children, split our minimal assets according to Ohio law. She'd kept the car and her retirement account. I'd kept my business debts and legal obligations. She'd been angry, understandably, about the financial collapse that had destroyed our stability. She'd accused me of hiding money, of prioritizing my business over our marriage, of being selfish and reckless. All of it was probably true. But she'd never accused me of being threatening or dangerous. Never suggested I was violent or unstable. Our split was bitter, but it was clean. Final divorce decree signed. No contact order at her request. Both of us moving on separately. The first strange detail I'd noticed was 3 weeks earlier. A registered letter from an attorney I didn't recognize. The envelope sat in my mailbox for 2 days before I opened it, expecting bills or legal notices related to my ongoing tax payment plan. Instead, I found a cease and desist letter from Vanessa's attorney, Marcus Ashford, demanding I stop all contact with Vanessa, stop following her, stop appearing at locations she frequented, and warning that continued harassment would result in legal action. I'd read it 3 times, confused, then forwarded it to my own attorney, Nathan Greenberg, the same lawyer who'd handled my tax case and was managing my probation requirements. Nathan called me within an hour, his voice carrying that specific tone attorneys use when they're about to deliver bad news, but trying to stay professional. "Mason, talk to me. Have you had any contact with Vanessa since the divorce?" I'd been sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the ankle monitor's blinking green light that indicated normal operation. "Nathan, I've been under house arrest for 7 months. I haven't had contact with anyone except my probation officer, delivery drivers, and you. How would I have contact with Vanessa? I don't even know where she lives now." Nathan had been quiet for a moment. "Her attorney claims you've been following her, appearing at her workplace, sending messages from unknown numbers, showing up at her gym and restaurants. They have dates and specific incidents documented. I told him that's impossible given your monitoring status, but he says they have witnesses and photographic evidence. Mason, this is serious. If they file a formal complaint and law enforcement investigates, your probation could be revoked even if the charges don't stick. The appearance of violation is sometimes enough. I'd felt my stomach tighten. What kind of photographic evidence? The GPS data proves I haven't left my apartment. There's documentation of every movement I've made for 7 months. How can they have evidence of something that's physically impossible? Nathan had promised to request copies of the evidence and advise me once he'd reviewed it. In the meantime, I should document my own whereabouts during the dates mentioned in the cease and desist letter, should pull my own GPS monitoring reports to prove I'd been compliant. I'd done exactly that, requesting detailed location logs from my probation officer and organizing them by date. Every single alleged incident of stalking corresponded with times when the GPS data showed me sitting in my apartment, never moving more than the 150-foot boundary that encompassed my building's interior. The lawsuit arrived 2 weeks after that cease and desist letter, and now I was holding documented allegations that I'd been in 3 different states, at specific locations, at specific times, all while wearing an ankle monitor that proved otherwise. I called Nathan immediately, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. Nathan, she's suing me. $340,000. 14 incidents of stalking across 3 states. I need you to look at this immediately because I don't understand how this is happening. Nathan's office was downtown, about 8 miles from my apartment, too far for me to visit without a travel permit that would take days to arrange. Instead, I scanned every page of the lawsuit and emailed it to him, then sat on my couch staring at my ankle monitor like it was a bomb that might explode. The device was simple, unobtrusive, just a black plastic band about 3 inches wide with a small rectangular module containing the GPS tracker and cellular transmitter. It was waterproof, tamper-resistant, designed to withstand everything except deliberate attempts to remove it, which would trigger immediate alerts. I'd worn it so long it felt like part of my body, this constant weight reminding me of my restricted freedom. Now it was the only thing standing between me and either a massive financial judgment or potential criminal charges for violating a restraining order I didn't know existed. Nathan called back 30 minutes later. I've reviewed the lawsuit. Mason, this is bad. They're claiming documented stalking incidents in Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Rochester. Photographs of you at these locations, witness testimony, detailed descriptions. But you're right. The GPS data should exonerate you completely. I'm going to file a response denying all allegations and requesting immediate dismissal based on impossibility. You were under electronic monitoring during every alleged incident. That's ironclad alibi. I asked him about the photographs, about how anyone could have pictures of me in places I'd never been. Nathan's voice was careful. I haven't seen the photographs yet. They're listed as evidence but weren't included in the initial filing. We'll get them through discovery. But Mason, I need to ask you directly. Is there any possibility the monitoring system malfunctioned? Anytime your device showed offline or lost signal? I'd pulled up my monitoring reports on my laptop, scanning through months of data. No, every single day shows continuous monitoring. No gaps, no signal loss. The device has been functioning perfectly since the day it was installed. But over the next several days, as Nathan began the discovery process and requested evidence from Vanessa's attorney, the situation got worse instead of better. The photographs arrived first, delivered to Nathan's office via secure file transfer. He called me to describe them before sending copies. Mason, I'm looking at about 30 photographs, allegedly taken over 6 months. They show a man who looks very much like you at the locations Vanessa claimed. Cleveland outside her office building. Pittsburgh at a restaurant where she was eating dinner. Rochester at a shopping mall. The man in the photos has your build, your hair color, similar clothing style. I can see why she might think it was you, but we know it can't be because of the GPS data. He sent the files, and I opened them on my laptop with hands that had gone cold. The photographs were taken from distances of 20 to 50 feet, slightly blurry, shot with phone cameras in various lighting conditions. And Nathan was right. The man in these photos looked like me. Same height, approximately 6 feet, same lean build, same dark brown hair cut short. Similar clothing choices, jeans and solid color shirts. In one photo from Cleveland, the man was standing across the street from an office building, partially obscured by a car, appearing to watch the entrance. In another from Pittsburgh, he was visible through a restaurant window, sitting alone with a view of a table where Vanessa was presumably dining with friends. In a Rochester shopping mall photo, he was behind Vanessa in what looked like a common area, his face turned away from the camera, but his posture suggesting he was watching her. I stared at these images for 20 minutes, zooming in on every detail, and felt reality becoming unreliable. This man looked like me, not identical, but close enough that someone who'd been married to me for 6 years might genuinely believe it was me. But it wasn't. I knew with absolute certainty I'd never been to those places, never worn those specific outfits in those locations, never stood in those positions, and the GPS data proved it. Except doubt was creeping in, the kind that comes when evidence contradicts certainty. Could I have somehow been in those places without remembering? Was I losing time? Experiencing dissociative episodes? The thoughts were irrational, but the photos made them feel possible until I looked down at my ankle monitor and remembered I couldn't have left my apartment without triggering immediate alerts. Nathan filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit 3 days later, attaching my complete GPS monitoring records covering every date mentioned in Vanessa's allegations. The motion argued that the defendant was under electronic monitoring by court order, that his location was tracked continuously, that the monitoring data proved he was physically present at his residence during every alleged stalking incident, and that the lawsuit was therefore frivolous and should be dismissed with prejudice. Vanessa's attorney, Marcus Ashford, responded with a counter-motion claiming the GPS data was potentially falsified or manipulated, that electronic monitoring systems were known to malfunction, and that photographic evidence and witness testimony superseded electronic records that could be compromised. The judge, Honorable Diane Thornton, scheduled a hearing for 3 weeks out to review the evidence and determine whether the case had sufficient merit to proceed to trial. In the meantime, Nathan advised me to request a formal statement from my probation officer confirming my compliance, to document my daily routine with as much detail as possible, and to prepare for the possibility that this would get worse before it got better. Officer Rita Blackwell provided a detailed affidavit within 48 hours. Her statement confirmed I'd been under house arrest for 243 days, that my GPS monitoring device had functioned continuously without malfunction, that I'd never violated my movement restrictions, that I'd attended 3 approved medical appointments with proper permits and escort verification, and that any unauthorized movement would have triggered immediate alerts that would have resulted in my arrest. She included technical documentation from the monitoring company, Sentinel location services, showing signal logs, GPS coordinates recorded every 60 seconds, battery status reports, and tamper detection logs. Everything demonstrated perfect compliance. But Marcus Ashford's follow-up filing introduced something that made my stomach drop. According to his response, Vanessa was prepared to testify that I'd been sending her threatening text messages from unknown numbers, messages that referenced specific details about her daily routine that only someone following her could know. The messages allegedly started 4 months ago and continued through last week. Nathan requested copies of these messages through Discovery, and when they arrived, I felt reality tilting again. The text messages were sent from various phone numbers, all showing as unregistered burner phones when Nathan's investigator tried to trace them. The content was disturbing, personal, threatening in ways that suggested intimate knowledge of Vanessa's life. I saw you at the coffee shop on Maple Street this morning. You looked good in that blue dress. Your new boyfriend doesn't deserve you. You should be more careful about who you trust. I'll always be watching. You can't escape what we had. Moving to a new apartment won't help. I know where you live now. Dozens of messages spread across 4 months, escalating in frequency and specificity. And the details they referenced, Vanessa's clothing choices, locations she'd visited, her new relationship status, suggested someone was actually observing her life closely. I'd never sent any of these messages, never communicated with Vanessa since our divorce, never had any desire to contact her or interfere with her new life. But someone was sending them, and that someone apparently looked enough like me to be photographed at multiple locations across 3 states. Nathan brought in a forensic technology expert, Carol Zimmerman, former FBI cybercrime investigator with 23 years of experience. She analyzed the text messages, traced the burner phone numbers, examined patterns in the timing and content. The numbers are purchased burner phones, probably bought with cash, activated and discarded after a few messages, Carol explained during a video conference call. Impossible to trace to a specific purchaser without surveillance footage from stores where they were bought, which probably doesn't exist. But here's what's interesting. The messages were sent during times when your GPS data shows you were at your apartment. Every single one. If you'd sent these messages, you'd have done it from your residence, which means phone tower triangulation data should show signals originating from your location. I've subpoenaed tower records for the dates and times these messages were sent, and I'm betting we'll find they didn't come from towers near your apartment. Officer Blackwell called me directly 4 days before the hearing, her voice carrying an edge I hadn't heard before. Mason, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Has anyone else had access to your apartment in the past 8 months? Anyone who might have used your computer or your phone to send messages? I'd been sitting at my desk, working on a coding project for a client, when her call came through. No, delivery drivers leave packages at my door, but they never come inside. My sister visited once, but she was only here for 3 hours, and I was with her the whole time. Nobody else has been in my apartment. Rita's voice was careful. What about someone creating a fake monitoring signal? Someone sophisticated enough to generate GPS data showing you at home while you were actually somewhere else? The suggestion made my chest tighten. Rita, is that even possible? I thought these systems were tamper-proof. She was quiet for a moment. They're designed to be tamper-proof, but nothing is absolutely impossible. If someone had the technical knowledge and equipment, they could theoretically spoof GPS signals or hack into the monitoring system. It would require significant expertise and resources, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying we need to consider every explanation because someone is going out of their way to make it look like you're stalking your ex-wife, and they're doing it in a way that contradicts your monitoring data. That suggests either sophisticated fraud or something I'm not seeing. Nathan arranged for Carol Zimmerman to conduct a comprehensive technical audit of my monitoring equipment and the Sentinel Location Services system. She came to my apartment with portable diagnostic equipment, spent 4 hours testing my ankle monitor's signal integrity, examining my router and internet connection, scanning for evidence of hacking or GPS spoofing devices. When she finished, her report was definitive. My monitoring device was functioning exactly as designed, transmitting authentic GPS coordinates every 60 seconds, showing no signs of tampering or signal manipulation. My apartment showed no evidence of GPS spoofing equipment, no unauthorized devices that could generate false location data. The monitoring system records were genuine, not fabricated or altered. The hearing before Judge Thornton was conducted via video conference because I couldn't attend in person without a special travel permit. I sat in my apartment with my laptop positioned so the judge could see me and my ankle monitor clearly visible in the frame. Nathan attended from his office. Marcus Ashford and Vanessa attended from the courtroom. The judge reviewed the evidence methodically, the GPS monitoring records showing me at my apartment during every alleged stalking incident, Officer Blackwell's affidavit confirming my compliance, the forensic report verifying the authenticity of my monitoring data, the photographs showing someone who looked like me in 3 different states, witness statements from 6 people who claimed to have seen me at these locations, and the text messages sent from burner phones. Judge Thornton was in her late 50s, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose as she examined documents on her screen. Mr. Ashford, your client claims the defendant stalked her across 3 states during a period when he was under continuous GPS monitoring. The monitoring data shows he never left his residence. How do you reconcile this contradiction? Marcus Ashford was smooth, confident, the kind of attorney who'd practiced for decades and knew how to create doubt. Your Honor, electronic monitoring systems are fallible. They can be manipulated by individuals with technical expertise, which the defendant possesses given his work as a software consultant. The photographic evidence and witness testimony provide direct proof of the defendant's presence at multiple locations. We believe the defendant either compromised his monitoring device or enlisted an accomplice to manipulate the data while he was traveling. The coincidence of someone who looks exactly like him appearing at locations where his ex-wife happens to be, multiple times across multiple states, strains credulity. The simplest explanation is that he's stalking her and covering his tracks through technical manipulation. Nathan responded immediately. Your Honor, the forensic analysis conducted by Carol Zimmerman, a former FBI cybercrime investigator, confirms that the defendant's monitoring equipment is functioning properly and shows no signs of tampering or manipulation. The monitoring company's records corroborate this finding. Furthermore, cell tower data for the burner phones used to send threatening messages shows those signals originated from locations far from the defendant's residence, proving he didn't send them. What we have here is not evidence of stalking by my client, but evidence that someone is impersonating him and deliberately framing him for conduct he didn't commit. The GPS data is ironclad alibi, and without it being successfully challenged, this lawsuit has no merit. Judge Thornton reviewed the forensic reports for several minutes, her expression unreadable. Mr. Greenberg, the photographs do show someone who bears a strong resemblance to your client. Do you have an explanation for that? Nathan nodded. We believe someone is deliberately impersonating Mr. Sterling, appearing at locations where Miss Hartwell spends time, making himself visible enough to be photographed, creating the appearance of stalking. This could be someone Miss Hartwell knows who wants to harm Mr. Sterling, or it could be a stranger with an obsession with Miss Hartwell, who happens to resemble Mr. Sterling. We're actively investigating, but regardless of who is responsible, the GPS data proves it isn't my client. The judge looked directly into her camera, which meant she was looking at me through the video conference. Mr. Sterling, do you have any idea who might want to frame you for stalking your ex-wife? I'd been sitting silently for the entire hearing, listening to my life being dissected, feeling powerless. Now I spoke carefully. Your Honor, I don't know. My ex-wife and I had a difficult divorce, but I've had no contact with her since it was finalized. I've been living quietly under house arrest, trying to serve my sentence and move on with my life. I can't imagine who would go to this much trouble to make it look like I'm stalking her, but I can tell you with absolute certainty that I haven't been to Cleveland, Pittsburgh, or Rochester. I haven't left my apartment except for 3 medical appointments that were documented and approved, and I haven't sent any threatening messages to anyone. Judge Thornton closed the file on her screen. I'm going to reserve judgment on the motion to dismiss. Both parties will conduct further discovery. Mr. Ashford, I want independent verification of those photographs, metadata analysis, authentication, chain of custody. Mr. Greenberg, I want your investigator to identify potential suspects who might be impersonating your client. We'll reconvene in 30 days. In the meantime, Miss Hartwell's restraining order will remain in effect, which shouldn't affect Mr. Sterling given his house arrest status. This hearing is adjourned. After the hearing ended, I sat in my apartment staring at the blank screen, feeling like I'd lost ground despite having ironclad evidence on my side. Nathan called 15 minutes later. That went better than it could have. The judge didn't dismiss the case outright, but she's clearly skeptical of Vanessa's claims. We need to figure out who's doing this, Mason. Someone is going to a lot of trouble and expense to frame you. That suggests strong motivation, revenge, financial gain, something personal. Start making a list of anyone who might have a grudge against you or Vanessa, ex-boyfriends, former business partners, anyone with motive to harm either of you. I spent that evening compiling a list, trying to think of anyone who might want to hurt me or Vanessa badly enough to orchestrate such an elaborate frame-up. My former business partners had been angry when the company collapsed, but they'd sued me civilly and won judgments. They'd gotten their revenge through legal channels. Vanessa's family had never liked me, but framing me for stalking seemed extreme. Her friends had been supportive during the divorce but hadn't seemed vindictive. I couldn't think of anyone with sufficient motive and resources to pull this off. Then I remembered something Vanessa had mentioned in one of her deposition answers that Nathan had shared. She'd referenced her new boyfriend, Kevin, who'd been supportive during the stalking incidents. I'd assumed this was someone she'd started dating after our divorce, but I'd never asked for details. What if Kevin was more involved than just being a supportive partner? What if he had some reason to want me blamed for stalking? Nathan ran a background check on Kevin Price, age 34, who'd been dating Vanessa for approximately 9 months, according to social media records Carol Zimmerman pulled. Kevin was a freelance photographer and videographer, which immediately raised flags given the quality and angles of the photographs allegedly showing me stalking Vanessa. He'd previously lived in Cleveland before moving to Columbus 8 months ago, right around the time the alleged stalking incidents began. His social media showed photos from Pittsburgh and Rochester at various times over the past year, cities where I'd allegedly stalked Vanessa. Nathan brought Carol Zimmerman and a private investigator named Leonard Shaw into a strategy meeting via video conference. Leonard was former military intelligence, specialized in corporate espionage and fraud investigation. "Gentlemen, we might have found our culprit," Nathan said, pulling up Kevin Price's information on screen. "Carol, I need you to analyze those stalking photographs for professional photography techniques. If Kevin took these photos himself while posing as Mason, there might be technical signatures that identify him as the photographer. Leonard, I need deep background on Kevin Price, financials, past relationships, any history of obsessive behavior or fraud, and I need to know if he has any technical expertise that would allow him to understand GPS monitoring systems." Carol started her analysis immediately, examining the metadata from the photographs Vanessa's attorney had provided. Within 2 days, she'd found something remarkable. The photos were taken with 3 different phones over 6 months, which makes sense if someone was using disposable burner phones, but several of them show technical knowledge, specific composition choices, lighting adjustments, focus techniques that suggest professional photography experience. More importantly, I found something in the metadata that wasn't stripped properly. 2 of the photos from Pittsburgh contain embedded GPS coordinates in the XAF data, and those coordinates place the photographer not at the locations shown in the images, but at a different position entirely. The coordinates suggest these photos were taken from a vehicle parked across the street, using a telephoto lens to capture the apparent stalking subject from a distance. This doesn't look like surveillance photos taken by a victim documenting their stalker. This looks like staged photography designed to create the appearance of stalking. Leonard Shaw's background investigation on Kevin Price revealed even more concerning information. Kevin had been engaged 3 years earlier to a woman in Cleveland who'd broken off the relationship citing controlling behavior and possessiveness. She'd filed a police report alleging Kevin had stalked her after their breakup, appearing at her workplace and home, sending harassing messages. The charges were eventually dropped after Kevin agreed to a restraining order and 6 months of counseling. "This man has a documented history of stalking behavior," Leonard explained during our next strategy meeting. "And he's a professional photographer who understands how to manipulate images and create false narratives. He's been dating your ex-wife for 9 months, which overlaps perfectly with when the alleged stalking incidents began. I think we're looking at a classic case of projection. Kevin is actually stalking Vanessa or wants to isolate her, so he's framing you for stalking to make himself look like her protector while eliminating you as someone she might reconnect with." Nathan filed an emergency motion with Judge Thornton requesting permission to depose Kevin Price and to subpoena his financial records, phone records, and travel history. The motion argued that newly discovered evidence suggested Vanessa's boyfriend might be responsible for the stalking incidents and the frame-up. Marcus Ashford fought the motion aggressively, arguing that Kevin was a victim, helping his girlfriend deal with harassment, that investigating him was a desperate attempt by the defense to deflect blame, and that there was no evidence connecting Kevin to any wrongdoing. But Judge Thornton granted the motion for limited discovery, allowing Nathan to depose Kevin and request specific records related to his travel and phone usage during the relevant time period. The deposition was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Leonard Shaw continued investigating, following Kevin discreetly, documenting his movements and behavior. What he discovered was disturbing. Kevin was conducting counter-surveillance on Vanessa, following her to work, photographing her throughout the day, tracking her location obsessively. Leonard captured video evidence of Kevin sitting in his car outside Vanessa's office for hours, following her to the gym, parking near restaurants where she met friends. "This man is stalking her," Leonard reported. "She either doesn't realize it because she thinks he's being protective, or she's aware and hasn't acknowledged it. Either way, he's exhibiting classic stalking behavior, constant monitoring, obsessive documentation, isolation tactics. I've seen this pattern dozens of times. He's dangerous, and he's using the false stalking allegations against you as cover for his own conduct." Nathan immediately contacted Vanessa's attorney, requesting an urgent meeting to discuss concerns about Kevin Price's behavior. Marcus Ashford was dismissive initially, but when Nathan provided video evidence of Kevin following Vanessa without her apparent knowledge, Marcus agreed to a confidential meeting with Vanessa present. The meeting happened at Marcus Ashford's office, with Nathan attending in person and me joining via video link from my apartment. Vanessa looked different than I remembered. Thinner, more anxious, her blonde hair shorter. She sat next to Marcus, her posture defensive. Nathan presented the evidence methodically. Kevin's prior stalking conviction, the analysis of the photographs showing professional photography techniques, the metadata evidence suggesting staged compositions, Leonard Shaw's surveillance video showing Kevin following Vanessa obsessively, and financial records showing Kevin had purchased multiple burner phones during the time period when the threatening text messages were sent to Vanessa. "Miss Hartwell," Nathan said carefully, "we believe Kevin Price has been stalking you while framing my client for that stalking. The evidence suggests he's been following you, photographing you, sending you threatening messages designed to make you afraid and dependent on him for protection. He may have even hired someone who resembles Mason to appear at locations where you'd see them, or he may have been wearing disguises himself to look more like my client. Either way, Mason couldn't have done what you've accused him of. He's been under house arrest with GPS monitoring the entire time. Kevin, on the other hand, has been traveling to all these cities, has the technical skills to stage these incidents, and has a documented history of stalking behavior." Vanessa's face went pale. "That's not possible. Kevin's been supportive. He's been helping me document the stalking, encouraging me to report it, telling me I needed to protect myself." Nathan pulled up a series of text messages on his laptop screen, the threatening messages sent to Vanessa from burner phones. "Do these messages sound like something Mason would write? You were married to him for 6 years? Does this sound like his communication style, his word choice, his phrasing?" Vanessa read them again, her hands shaking slightly. "No," she admitted quietly. "These don't sound like Mason. They're more possessive, more obsessive. Mason was a lot of things, but he was never possessive or controlling." Nathan nodded. "These messages sound like Kevin's previous stalking victim described his behavior. Possessive, controlling, isolating." Carol Zimmerman, our forensic tech expert, analyzed the linguistic patterns in these messages and compared them to Kevin's social media posts and emails. The sentence structure, vocabulary choices, and thematic content match Kevin's writing style, not Mason's. "We believe Kevin sent these messages to you, making you afraid, then positioned himself as your protector while framing Mason as the threat." Vanessa looked like she might be sick. "Why would he do that? What does he gain from making me think Mason was stalking me?" Leonard Shaw spoke up from his position in the corner of the office. "Control and isolation, Miss Hartwell. Classic domestic abuser tactics. Make you afraid of an external threat, position himself as your only source of safety, cut you off from other relationships, make you dependent on him. Then, once you're isolated, the abuse escalates. Has Kevin been encouraging you to cut ties with friends or family? Has he been suggesting you move in with him? Has he been monitoring your phone or asking for passwords to your accounts?" Vanessa's expression confirmed everything before she spoke. "He's been very concerned about my safety. He installed a tracking app on my phone 6 months ago so he could monitor my location and make sure I was safe. He's been suggesting I move in with him so he could protect me better. He said my friends don't take the stalking seriously and that I should distance myself from people who don't support me. I thought he was being caring. I thought he was trying to help." Marcus Ashford, who'd been listening silently, leaned forward. "Vanessa, I need you to think very carefully about something. When you first told me Mason was stalking you, who suggested it was him? Did you recognize him in those photographs, or did Kevin tell you it was him?" Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "Kevin identified him. I saw someone who looked similar to Mason at a few places, but the photos were blurry and I wasn't completely certain. Kevin was the one who said it was definitely Mason, who said we needed to document everything, who encouraged me to hire you and file the lawsuit. He said Mason was dangerous and that we needed to stop him legally before he hurt me." The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Kevin had orchestrated the entire scheme, stalking Vanessa himself while framing me, using his photography skills to stage images that looked like surveillance of stalking, sending threatening messages from burner phones to increase her fear, positioning himself as her protector, isolating her from friends and family, and ultimately encouraging her to file a massive lawsuit against me that would destroy me financially and potentially send me back to prison. Nathan pulled up another document on his screen. Kevin Price's financial records show he's in significant debt, over $90,000 in credit card debt and unpaid business loans. If Vanessa won this lawsuit against Mason, she'd receive $340,000. If Kevin convinced her to marry him or share her finances, he'd have access to that money. We believe his motivation was partly control over Vanessa, partly financial gain from the lawsuit settlement, and partly revenge against Mason for being Vanessa's ex-husband. He couldn't tolerate the idea that she'd been married to someone else, so he wanted to destroy Mason while making himself look like a hero. Vanessa was crying now, her hands covering her face. "I believed him. I trusted him. He seemed so concerned about my safety. I had no idea he was doing this to me." Marcus Ashford's expression had gone from defensive to horrified. "Miss Hartwell, we need to involve law enforcement immediately. If Mr. Greenberg's evidence is accurate, Kevin Price has committed multiple crimes: stalking, harassment, fraud, possibly others, and you may be in danger if he realizes you're aware of his deception. Nathan nodded. I've already contacted Detective James Kowalski with the Columbus Police Department Fraud Division. He's reviewed our evidence and agreed to open an investigation. But Vanessa, we need your cooperation. You need to report Kevin's behavior officially, provide access to your phone with his tracking app, agree to be interviewed about his conduct. This is going to be difficult, but it's necessary to stop him and to clear Mason's name. The meeting ended with Vanessa agreeing to cooperate fully, Marcus Ashford promising to file a motion withdrawing the lawsuit against me with prejudice, and Nathan scheduling a meeting with Detective Kowalski for the following day. I sat in my apartment after the video call ended, feeling numb. For months, I'd been facing the possibility of financial ruin and potential prison time for something I hadn't done, something I couldn't have done. Now it turned out my ex-wife had been manipulated by her abusive boyfriend into believing I was stalking her, all while he was actually the one terrorizing her. Detective Kowalski's investigation moved quickly once Vanessa provided evidence. The tracking app on her phone showed Kevin had been monitoring her location obsessively for 6 months. Her phone records showed frequent calls from Kevin during times when she'd reported feeling afraid or seeing her stalker. Financial records showed Kevin had purchased 8 burner phones during the relevant period, matching the number used to send threatening messages. And surveillance footage from stores in Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Rochester showed Kevin purchasing items while traveling to those cities on the exact dates when I'd allegedly been stalking Vanessa in those locations. Most damning was Carol Zimmerman's analysis of the photographs. She'd obtained the original image files from Vanessa's phone, where Kevin had sent them after allegedly capturing the stalker. The metadata showed the photos were taken with Kevin's professional camera equipment, then deliberately degraded and transferred to burner phones before being sent to Vanessa to make them look like quickly snapped surveillance photos. Kevin had literally been photographing someone who resembled me, possibly hiring an actor or model who matched my general appearance, then sending those staged photos to Vanessa while claiming he'd caught her stalker on camera. Leonard Shaw identified the man in the photographs through reverse image searching and social media cross-referencing. His name was Troy Dennison, an aspiring actor who lived in Cleveland and had done modeling work for Kevin's photography business over the past year. When Detective Kowalski interviewed Troy, he admitted Kevin had hired him to appear at specific locations wearing specific clothing, telling Troy it was for a photography project about urban surveillance and modern anxiety. Troy had no idea he was being used as part of a stalking fraud scheme. Kevin Price was arrested at his apartment on a Thursday morning, charged with stalking, criminal harassment, fraud, and conspiracy. The arrest made local news because of the unusual circumstances. A man who'd been helping his girlfriend document alleged stalking was actually the stalker himself, framing the victim's ex-husband who'd been under house arrest the entire time. Vanessa issued a public statement through Marcus Ashford's office, apologizing to me for the false accusations, explaining that she'd been manipulated by an abusive partner, and expressing gratitude that the truth had been discovered before irreparable harm was done. Marcus filed an emergency motion withdrawing the lawsuit with prejudice and requesting the court seal all records related to the case to protect everyone's privacy. Judge Thornton granted the motion and issued a written opinion praising Nathan's investigation and noting that the case demonstrated the importance of thoroughly examining evidence before rushing to judgment based on appearances. Nathan negotiated a settlement where Vanessa agreed to pay my legal fees, approximately $43,000, and provide a written apology acknowledging the false accusations. It wasn't the $340,000 she'd been seeking from me, but it covered my costs and provided some measure of justice. Officer Rita Blackwell called me the day after Kevin's arrest, her voice warm for the first time since I'd known her. Mason, I owe you an apology. When those stalking allegations first surfaced, part of me wondered if you'd somehow found a way to circumvent the monitoring system. I should have trusted the data more completely. You've been a model probationer, and you deserved better than having your compliance questioned. I'd been sitting at my kitchen table, looking at the ankle monitor that had saved me from prison. Rita, the data proved I was innocent. Without this device tracking my every movement, I wouldn't have had an alibi. Kevin was counting on people doubting the monitoring system's reliability, but the system worked exactly as designed. It kept me confined, but it also kept me free. 3 weeks later, Kevin Price pled guilty to multiple charges as part of a negotiated plea deal. He received 4 years in state prison for stalking, harassment, and fraud, along with mandatory psychological counseling and a permanent restraining order prohibiting contact with Vanessa. Troy Dennison wasn't charged with any crime since he'd been an unwitting participant in Kevin's scheme. Vanessa moved to a new apartment with enhanced security, started therapy to process the trauma of having been stalked and manipulated by someone she'd trusted, and slowly began rebuilding her life. She sent me a handwritten letter 3 months after Kevin's conviction, apologizing again for the accusations and thanking me for not pursuing further legal action against her. I know I hurt you badly by believing Kevin's lies, she wrote. I should have questioned things more carefully. I should have remembered that you were never controlling or violent during our marriage. I let fear cloud my judgment, and I'm so sorry for what that cost you. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if that's not possible. I'd read her letter several times, trying to process my feelings. Anger, certainly, She'd believed I was capable of stalking her, had been willing to sue me for hundreds of thousands of dollars, had nearly destroyed my probation status. But also understanding, because Kevin had been manipulating her expertly, using her legitimate fears against her, creating a narrative that seemed plausible until someone looked closely at the evidence. I wrote back briefly, telling her I accepted her apology and hoped she'd found safety and peace. I didn't say I forgave her completely, because I wasn't sure that was true yet, but I said I understood, which felt more honest. My house arrest ended 4 months later, on schedule, with no extensions or complications from the stalking allegations. Officer Blackwell removed the ankle monitor at 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning, using a specialized cutting tool to sever the locked band without damaging my skin. The sudden absence of weight around my ankle felt strange, like phantom limb sensation, a constant presence suddenly gone. "You're free, Mason," Rita said, handing me official documents confirming successful completion of my sentence. "You served your time with perfect compliance, despite facing false accusations that could have derailed everything. That takes integrity. I hope the rest of your life goes smoother than this past year has been." I'd walked outside my apartment building for the first time in 13 months, without wearing a monitoring device, stood on the sidewalk in June sunshine, and felt overwhelming relief mixed with residual anxiety. Freedom felt precarious, like something that could be taken away at any moment if I wasn't careful. But it was real. I was truly free to go anywhere, do anything, rebuild my life without electronic surveillance. Nathan Greenberg called that afternoon to congratulate me and provide a final update. "Kevin Price is serving his sentence without incident. Vanessa has moved on with her life, and by all accounts is doing well. Your criminal record for the tax evasion will remain, but there's no record of the stalking allegations, since those were withdrawn and sealed. You've got a clean slate moving forward, aside from the original conviction you've already served time for." I thanked Nathan for everything he'd done, for believing me when evidence seemed to suggest impossible things, for investigating thoroughly when a less dedicated attorney might have simply advised me to settle. "You saved my life," I told him. "Without your work, I'd probably be in prison right now, serving additional time for stalking I didn't commit, with no way to prove my innocence." Nathan's voice was quiet. "The GPS data proved your innocence, Mason. The monitoring system that restricted your freedom for a year ultimately saved you from much worse. That's the irony of surveillance. It can be oppressive and protective simultaneously. In your case, being watched constantly was exactly what you needed." 6 months after my release, I ran into Vanessa at a grocery store, the first time I'd seen her in person since our divorce 3 years earlier. We both froze for a moment in the produce section, then she approached me carefully. "Mason, hi. How are you doing?" I'd been holding a bag of apples, feeling awkward. "I'm okay. Working, rebuilding, moving forward. How about you?" She'd looked healthier than during the video calls during the lawsuit, less anxious. "I'm good. Better. Therapy is helping. I wanted to say again that I'm so sorry for everything Kevin put you through by manipulating me. I think about it constantly, about how badly that could have gone if your lawyer hadn't investigated so thoroughly." I'd nodded, not sure what else to say. "I'm glad you're safe now. That's what matters." We talked for a few more minutes, awkward conversation between two people whose lives had been violently entangled and then separated by trauma. She told me she was seeing someone new, a teacher she'd met through friends, someone kind and stable. I told her I was focusing on my work and wasn't dating yet. Eventually, we said goodbye, wished each other well, and went separate directions through the store. It felt like closure, finally, after years of complicated endings and false accusations and surveillance and fear. The whole experience had taught me things I wished I hadn't needed to learn, that evidence matters more than assumptions, that surveillance can be both prison and salvation, that trust is fragile and easily manipulated by people with malicious intent, that the truth eventually surfaces, but sometimes nearly too late to matter. I still think about that ankle monitor sometimes, about the 397 days I wore it, about how it restricted every aspect of my freedom while simultaneously proving my innocence of crimes I couldn't have committed. About how Kevin Price had built his entire scheme around the assumption that people would doubt the reliability of GPS monitoring, would believe photographs and witness testimony over electronic data, would assume that where there's accusation, there must be some truth. He'd been wrong, barely, saved only by Nathan's thoroughness and my insistence on fighting despite the odds. The monitoring data had been ironclad, unimpeachable, the one piece of evidence that couldn't be manipulated or reinterpreted. It showed exactly where I'd been every moment of every day for 13 months, and that data had been my salvation. Now I live in a different apartment across town, work for a different consulting firm, slowly rebuild relationships with friends and family who distanced themselves during my conviction and house arrest. I carry copies of my GPS monitoring reports in my car, stored in a folder marked alibi, just in case someone else decides to accuse me of something impossible, just in case reality bends again and I need proof that I was exactly where I said I was. Because the truth needs evidence to survive, and I learned the hard way that your word means nothing without data to back it up. Kevin Price is eligible for parole in 18 months, and part of me worries about what he might do when he's released. But Vanessa has a restraining order, has security systems and support networks, has learned to recognize the warning signs of controlling behavior. She'll be okay. I'll be okay. We both survived someone who tried to destroy us by weaponizing the justice system, by creating false narratives that seemed plausible until someone looked closely enough to find the cracks. The lawsuit that accused me of stalking her across 3 states while I wore an ankle monitor that proved I'd never left my apartment, that absurd, terrifying, nearly successful lie that almost sent me back to prison, is over now, filed away, sealed by court order, mentioned only in private conversations with my attorney and my sister, and occasionally in therapy sessions where I processed the trauma of being accused of something impossible. But I survived it. The monitoring data proved my innocence. The truth came out. Justice, delayed and imperfect but real, arrived. And now I'm free, truly free, to live without surveillance or suspicion or false accusations, at least until the next impossible thing happens. But I'll be ready with evidence, with data, with proof of exactly where I was and what I did, because that's what survival looks like now. Documentation, evidence, the paper trail that shows truth when words aren't enough. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.